Hi everybody, we're live from the DNC Digital Studio in downtown. I'm Julie Philipp, Senior Engagement Editor here at the Democrat and Chronicle, and joining me is the man of the hour, David Andreatta, our columnist, who has just published his 200th column. He's a little bit over that now, and in honor of that momentous event, we are publishing an ebook called I've Got This. Which is available, we're going to plug it first, on Amazon.
Right.
You don't need a Kindle, you can just go there, $3.99, download, and they'll tell you all the different ways you can read it if you do not have a Kindle.
Very easy to do.
Yes. So congratulations for making
Julie.
it this far. So did you grow up thinking you wanted to be a writer? Like, is that little David Andreatta?
Yeah, well, actually, I first wanted to be, I guess there were three things. First was a hockey player, then there was a magician. I went through a phase of magician. And then it became a writer. I don't know how I made that leap, but there was a phase of my life as a child where I really enjoyed magic, and I still enjoy doing that for young children.
Okay.
But writer, I'd say from the time I was a young teenager, yes. Yeah.
And you really started in journalism as a kind of a beat reporter. Is that how you got your start?
Yeah. My first start out of journalism school, where I attended Newhouse College at Syracuse. Was at the Staten Island Advance, which was and is a daily newspaper in Staten Island, one of the boroughs of New York City. And I started there as a afternoon shift general assignment reporter, working Tuesday through Sunday, 4 to midnight. So I don't want to hear any young people here at the DNC complaining about their hours.
But you do, I'm sure you do. So, given your journalism background, you are just really good at asking questions until you get an answer. But you're also really good at getting people to do stuff, like climb into their garbage cans, or have a picnic in a little park, with strangers. So what's your secret? Do you have any tricks for getting people to open up to you and to go along with those crazy ideas in your head?
Well, I will say that what you're referring to, the getting into their garbage cans, referring to a column that I wrote about these ginormous garbage cans that the village of Spencerport made the residents out there get recently. And several people actually complained about having to pay the bill, and complained that these cans were just too big for them. And that one was their idea. They wanted to show me how big it was, and I said, be my guest, just don't hurt yourself.
But they knew the kind of writer you were, sure, and that you would go for that. So,
yeah.
Because you are good at getting people to play along.
Thanks. And I try to do that. I think the trick is really just putting them at ease and talking to people for a long time, any of these stunts like that picnic I had at David Gantz's old house, which was a popular column. I hear someone laughing in our live studio audience here.
Yes.
Thank you. I had to talk to a number of people and tell them, introduce myself, tell them that why I was there, explain the situation. It wasn't like I just staged a picnic and people started coming over. I had to sort of knock on doors in the neighborhood and ask if anyone would like to join me for a picnic. So I think it just takes putting people at ease. It takes talking to them. It takes being genuine. Just be yourself. I've always found.
Yeah, now you are very famous for the video of you mowing David Gantz, what was once his yard.
Right.
Tell us about how that came about and how you put that together.
Well, that was actually my second column that I'd ever written, and so I set the bar really high, and to this day I don't think I've ever matched that. But
no comment.
Right. My boss here who edits my columns. How it came about was it was a story. It was a riff on something news that had already broken. In fact, it wasn't even the Democrat and Chronicle that originally broke it. It was one of our television stations in town broke a story that David Gant had neglected to pay, Assemblyman David Gant had neglected to pay his property taxes, and that the city was taking over the House, or had already taken over the House. And it was, I just found it an outrage. I mean, here's an assemblyman, a politician who claims to care about the neighborhood that he represents. He let this house go to seed, stopped paying the property taxes like a deadbeat landlord, and let the city just take over his responsibility. I was outraged, but the story, which was well done on local television, was pretty dry. I mean, my delivery right now is basically that news. David Gant stopped paying taxes on his house, and the city took it over.
The talking head.
Right, and I just felt like there was an opportunity there to have some fun with that. I mean, I think news and news writing and columns, I mean, they should aim to entertain and educate first, but there's nothing that says you can't have fun. And that's sort of a brand that I wanted to establish for myself. It's not always easy. You know, I take on serious topics that sometimes don't lend themselves to laughter. And some of those topics are some of my favorite columns that I've done. But generally, I do try to have fun and approach things in a lighthearted way, slip in a few jokes if they're appropriate. I've heard from some critics that it's sometimes not appropriate.
A little over the line.
Yeah, a little over the top.
Everybody has different tastes, right?
Yeah.
So did you load up your own lawnmower in your car and?
Yeah. Well, so it was interesting when I started pitching that idea. I pitched it first to our editor, Karen Magnuson, who I think loved it, but I could see the wheels turning. Liability, trespassing, tickets, violations. What could go wrong if a piece of glass spits out of that mower across the street? Ultimately, we talked to our lawyer, and the lawyer said, at worst you're going to get a violation for trespassing. And in this case, it's worth it. Do it, because he got the spirit of it. And I had to convince the photographer who took that video, again, Carlos Ortiz, who shot that picture behind me and the cover photo of the book. I had to sort of convince him too that this was something new and different that we were doing here, and that it was uncharted territory for us and for journalists, news photographers to sort of have fun, let loose.
Right.
And he was a great sport with it. And ultimately, I think halfway through that assignment, he kind of got, all right, I think I know where we're going with this. And he was a great sport and did a great job.
Yeah. Now I know that's probably one of your favorite columns, but as you look back over your 200 now, a little bit more than 200 columns, what stands out the most? Which ones have affected you the most, either good or bad? Or,
yeah. Well, on to what I was saying earlier about my sometimes taking on serious topics. Really, a column that I'm most proud of was headlined "Death by Neglect on East Avenue," and it ran in September of 2015. And it was about a woman who had died of a heroin overdose while she was prostituting herself to feed her habit with a man in an apartment, his apartment on East Avenue. And she had passed out, and the man, instead of helping her immediately, like any thinking person would do, compassionate person would do, he waited, by some estimates, 75 minutes. And ultimately, she died. And there was no action at the time that I wrote that from any authorities, law enforcement authorities. And I can't say with certainty that that column got them to act, but the woman's parents believe that to be the case. I feel it in my gut that had this not gotten exposure,
and
it might not
they're
have.
the ones that tipped you off to what happened too, wasn't it, her mother?
Yeah, the mother called me up and said, my daughter died. At that point, it was a month earlier she had died. My daughter died, and you won't believe what happened. And she had no proof that this had happened. And I said, look, there's really not much I can do. I understand that you're grieving, but without evidence, I can't go down this road, and frankly, I've heard so many stories like this that I'm not inclined to spend the time and the resources to try and ferret out that police report. And she said, well, if I get it for you, would you be willing to write about it? I said, well, I'd have to see it. She did follow up, and everything that she promised was there. And I was blown away, flabbergasted. And I guess the reason that's a column that sticks out is because like I said, I don't think that law enforcement would have acted. I think they saw this woman as just another heroin addict. As you know, heroin use and overdoses are through the roof right now. They're spiking all over the country and in our area too. They would have seen her as another heroin addict. Sadly, a prostitute who was already up to no good just by the fact that she was in that apartment. Instead of looking at her as a real human being, a mom of 2 children with a problem, and who was left to die on a kitchen floor.
Which is the other thing that you do very well in your columns, is kind of let everybody see the humanity in everyone you write about. You make us feel something about the subject, the person you're writing about. And you do that very intentionally,
Yeah, I try. I would argue that some of our local elected officials might not feel that I portray them in a human light, but I
with the
do
exception of
try.
some of your political columns,
Yeah,
probably, yes.
yeah. But I do try. One that sticks out to me was a column I wrote about Amy Pearson, who's the wife of the slain Rochester police officer Darrell Pearson. She had become pregnant with another man's child 7 to 9 months or so after her husband was killed, and it became something of a local scandal. People seemed to really be very upset by this, and it had started to make radio talk shows. It had started to be written about in blogs. It certainly blew up on social media, and one thing that was missing from all that commentary was her voice. And I went and talked to her, and we had, it took a few days to sort of convince her to speak with me. I don't think that she's ever regretted it. She's thanked me for that article, and I tried to lend some humanity to that subject. This woman who held up the entire city at a time of darkness, was no longer human in the eyes of the public.
People judging.
Yeah.
Now, you cover so many different topics, and we just talked about politics, obviously, but the book, you have a section for parenting, columns, laugh lines, community, crime and punishment, and people. How do you go about choosing what you're going to write about?
Right. We did a series of promotional videos for this.
We did.
We did. You
Yes,
and I
we
did.
did.
That ran on Facebook. So I apologize to anyone who
Has
heard this before. But I'm going to answer the question, which was asked a different way, but it's essentially the same thing, which is basically what interests you. And I would say, well, anything that is interesting. Well, what is interesting? I don't know. It's you know it when you see it. What I try to do. I write 2 to 3 columns a week. Most people are familiar with my Sunday columns, but my work does appear in the paper and online more than that. And what I try to do is put a fresh perspective on a news story that's already out there, and attempt to advance it. Sometimes not all the reporting is there, or people still have additional questions, and I feel that I can shed some light on a topic that's already being written about and already being talked about. What I'd like to do more than that, though, is to get people talking about something new. So I think I'm a little unique. My work is a little unique among columnists in that I attempt to break news too. Sometimes it's big news. I wrote a story about a column about the choices that the Strong Museum of Play made in choosing its new executive director, and that got some pickup from local media and got a lot of attention. And sometimes it's little things like. Again, little things that I just find interesting and I'm sort of fascinated by. Webster, the town of Webster, was having a back and forth nonstop,
This was a good one.
social media interaction, which hundreds of people weighed in on whether it was appropriate to scoop your dog's poop and put it in someone else's garbage can. and I'm just sort of fascinated at the idea that many people cared about this issue. So,
Right.
I had a little fun with that one.
Yeah, I love sitting next to him because he's on the phone and he'll ask questions of, So what do you think about dog poop? You know, it's like not a typical reporter question half the time. But,
right.
Yeah, so what is your favorite part about your job?
Oh, there's no doubt it's about meeting people, the people that I meet. You know, the newspaper industry and the news media in general is under a lot of strain. I mean, this is a changing landscape in newspapers, and it's been challenging. Newspapers across the country are experiencing cutbacks. We're navigating new terrain in terms of video and photography and that sort of thing. And the DNC is not exempt from all these changes. They're happening everywhere. So it's a time of great challenge, and it can sometimes, you know, get you down in the dumps. But the one thing that just keeps me smiling and laughing and wanting to move forward are the people that I meet in my work. I don't know of any other job that allows you to meet so many different people on so many different days, that I can wear jeans to work, sometimes curse in the newsroom.
Sometimes it happens.
Reporters are sort of notorious potty mouths, and I'm no exception. But these are actually little perks to the job. Dress casually. Talk.
Sometimes
candidly.
he does not shave for days.
Right. Talk candidly to your colleagues. You know, part of the job is reading local media and national media online. I sometimes sit there for, you know, larger chunks of time than I want her to know about, you know, reading the newspapers around the country. Those things are all perks, but by far the biggest perk is meeting people and being able to often affect change, even if it's just a small change in their lives. The most gratifying, of course, are affecting widespread change. And I'm not sure that I've sort of hit that peak yet with a column. I have hit that peak in terms of in some of the investigative work that I used to do before I started writing columns, but never with columns yet. But just being able to give them a voice, meet them, make friends. You know, I get Christmas cards from families and people that I interview, and it's wonderful.
Okay, well, on that note, we're going to stop in just a second here because we have a great live audience right here in the studio with us, but we want to tell them one more time about I've Got This. And by the way, the title of the book is I've Got This because I sit next to him and somebody will say this news story is happening, and he is very often the first one in the newsroom. I got that, I've got this. And he will go and jump right on something that's breaking or something that's getting a lot of buzz in town. And so I think that really defines your style. So I think it's a great title.
Thank you.
And now you can sell it.
Okay. Yeah, so I've Got This available on Amazon right now for $3.99.
You don't need a Kindle.
You don't need a Kindle. Explain that, though, because you can explain that better than me.
I don't have a Kindle, but I can read it. You just go on and you'll see, right, if you go to Amazon and Google David Andreatta, you can try, if you have other names you like to call him, you can try, but David Andreatta will work. And it will pop right up and it will show you different things you can download to look at it right on your PC or on other devices like your phone or tablets. And it's pretty self-explanatory. It's very easy. You'll get an email and a link and you'll be fine. So don't be intimidated if you don't have a Kindle or have never used an ebook before. It's very, very, very easy. And in that ebook we have, how many, I never did count.
I think it's 35, 36.
35, and he really helped select all of them, except we have a reader's choice in there, which I think you liked anyway. So,
and you might say, well, why can't I just go to the website and look them up? Well, you might be able to, but like a Time Life collection, it's all right there for you.
And there's a really cool shot of him running.
Yeah, and there's a really cool shot of me running.
So I hope you'll take a look at that. And if you have any questions about it, don't hesitate to shoot one of us an email. Okay? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Have a good night, everybody.